So again, I try to make everything pretty relatable, pretty accessible. When we talk about entrepreneurship, before we even get to some of the stuff that I've got on the board here, when we talk about entrepreneurship, what do you all think of? What comes to mind? Money? If you do it right, otherwise it could be losing money, right, if you're not doing it right. So we can look at it both ways. What else besides money? Success, ideally, right. Some of the most successful people in our world are entrepreneurs, because you don't become the most successful by working for other people. I mean, you can make a good living, you can be very successful, but a lot of the money you're making for the company is going back to the company or other people at different levels, right? When you are an entrepreneur, yes, the risk is greater, but the reward is potentially greater too, right? What else?
Freedom.
Freedom, right? You're not necessarily having to report to somebody else. You can do things your way. You can manage it your way. It's your idea. You can build it out your way, hire the people you want, so forth. So yeah, a lot of freedom. Yeah.
Lots of trial and error.
Trial and error, yeah. You've got to be a scientist of sorts. That doesn't mean you have to be scientific. I am not a science guy, but I'm very entrepreneurial. But what I mean by you've got to be scientific, there's trial and error involved, right? There's a lot of pivoting involved. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and then we pivot when something doesn't work and figure out if it's something that we can get past and do better, or if we have to go an entirely different direction, which sometimes that's what we need to do. But that is part of that experimentation, right? And in that respect, we have to be willing to experiment. We have to be willing to take risks, and we have to be willing to fail. We're gonna talk a little bit about kind of the mindset you have to do those things, because it is not made for everybody, as you can imagine. And so let's focus on that first, and then we're gonna come back to what I've got on the board for the next part of this. Okay. Well, it's not wanting to. There. Okay, when we talk about the entrepreneurial mindset, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this because I really wanna get into the crux of what is gonna help you in every facet of your life. But before we get there, I really have to talk about these traits that you need to cultivate if you're gonna be successful in life, not even just as an entrepreneur. If you're gonna be really, truly, optimally successful in your life, you have to cultivate the attitude, the resilience, the creativity, the way in which you communicate, and that intrinsic motivation that I always spend a lot of time talking about. When we talk about attitude, how many of you have never really even thought about venturing out on your own and developing your own side hustle or business? Raise your hand if that's not something you've really thought seriously about. Okay, why not? Why haven't you?
I wanted something more stable.
Okay, very good. I was the same way. I felt very much the same way when I started my career. How about you? You had your hand up.
Yes, the risk, like needing more.
Absolutely. There's a lot of risk involved, right? I mean, at least, we go to work for an established company or organization, we know that there's gonna be that steady paycheck, right? We know that there's gonna be that consistent, steady income coming in. There's a lot less risk involved. However, there's also a lot less opportunity for growth. And one of the biggest reasons we fear risk is because we fear right? Absolutely. We fear failure. And that is one of the biggest problems. I talk a lot about self-fulfilling prophecies and the role that self-fulfilling prophecies play in our lives. What is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Do we have any psych people in here by chance? Oh, okay, good. Do you know what a self-fulfilling prophecy is?
If you're under the impression that you're going to fail, then you probably will.
There you go. And I think we've all been guilty of that, haven't we? How many of you all have ever kind of set yourself up for failure by saying, oh my God, I'm a terrible test taker, I suck at math, I'm bad at this, whatever else. And lo and behold, you probably don't take all the steps you could to get better, or we're not patient enough to take all the steps to get better, right? I'm bad at this. And because you already think you're bad at it and it's a foregone conclusion, your habits are more likely to reinforce that expected outcome. And so we fail and then we're like, see, I told you I was bad at this, right? And then the cycle just continues. You have to be willing to fail. Failure is a part of life. And it sometimes is where we learn the best lessons and where we gain the most. So don't be afraid to fail, but don't expect failure. Plan for it, but don't expect it. There's a difference, right? Go in planning to be successful, but have contingency plans in case it fails. That's all. Just know that there are times when it's not going to work, but you're going to have to pivot, but that's okay. That is part of the process. And that's where that resilience piece comes in, right? We have to be resilient. But again, too often fear gets in our way. How many of you don't see yourself as being particularly courageous people? You know, real risk takers. Okay, I mean, that doesn't mean you're a coward, I'm not saying that, right? But we're not particularly looking to put ourselves out there and take unnecessary risks, right? And I'm not gonna encourage you to take unnecessary risks. But calculated risks, don't be afraid of that, right? What did any literature people in here? You're a literature person? You know Mark Twain, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what Mark Twain said about courage? My favorite Mark Twain quote. I'm putting you on the spot. I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know it. I'll tell you what, I'll start it and you tell me if you think you can finish it.
Okay.
Okay, Mark Twain about courage said, courage is not the absence of fear. So don't think that that means you don't have to be afraid. We're afraid every time we venture out and try something we've never done before. I don't care if we're talking about the best athletes in the world, the best performers or entertainers or anything else. We're always afraid when we're venturing into something that we've never done before. I'm getting ready to take over the role of my executive director because she was just promoted and now I'm stepping into an entirely different position. Do you think I'm a little nervous about some of that? Yeah, because I haven't done her role. I'm good at my role, but I haven't done her role. So yeah, I'm scared. But Mark Twain said, courage is not the absence of fear, it's
The ability to overcome it?
yeah, and we overcome it by acting in spite of it, right? So it's not the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there because some of the best opportunities you're ever gonna have are gonna be scary at first, but worth the risk. How many of y'all have ever had a crush on somebody? Okay, okay. Okay, so how many of you, and it's okay, because we've all been there. How many of you have ever really had a crush on somebody and you never really said anything or did anything about it because you thought they're way out of my league, there's no way they're gonna like me anyway. I'm not gonna set myself up for failure, okay? Okay, but does that even make sense? I mean, okay, you might have saved yourself a little momentary embarrassment if they shot you down. But what is the answer by default if you never even asked in the first place? What's the answer by default? No. So, but they might say yes, right? If you put yourself out there, it's one of the biggest reasons people are afraid to go into sales. It's interesting because, I came from the corporate background, the corporate sector before I went into education. I worked for Caterpillar and, I was in sales and marketing and everything else. And it's so funny because so many of us tried to avoid those of us, especially in marketing. We love the market research, we love the advertising and promotion, and man, we didn't want anything to do with sales. Because sales is hard, man. And it's scary. And guess what? Do you know what the ratio is of no's to yeses when we talk about sales? What do they say? How many no's does it take to get a yes?
Lots.
A lot. Usually they say, I mean, it's not statistically backed up, but they usually say it takes 10 no's to get a yes. So if you approach your dating life or anything else that way, you just have to be resilient enough to know that if you don't give up, you're gonna get the yes. And you just hit them with more volume, right? So that means no more no's. That does mean you're gonna get more no's, but it also means you're gonna see more successes. So if we can just kind of condition ourselves to understand that failure and even rejection sometimes is just part of the process, we don't have to hold ourselves back. We can accomplish a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. And that's where creativity sometimes comes in mind too. I'm gonna use the same analogy, because I got some fun reactions and smiles when we talked about, if you ever had a crush on somebody. When you did, how many of you actually did follow up? Okay, and hopefully you had some success, at least in some cases. When you are trying to get somebody to see you, acknowledge you, like you back, go out with you, whatever it might be, do you sometimes find some creative ways to get their attention? Do you kind of put a little more thought and creative energy into how you're gonna get them to respond? Maybe, a little bit, hopefully. And then they go out with you. Yes. But then what happens? What happens after you've been together though, sometimes 6 months, 12 months, whatever, 2 years, 5 years? What tends to happen sometimes in those relationships that we were so excited about and so creative about at the beginning? Yeah. You what?
You fall out.
You fall out? Why do you fall out?
There's less effort.
Less effort? Things kind of get tougher? But when things get tougher, things weren't easy at the beginning either, right? It probably took a lot of thought and energy just to get them to go out with you in the first place. So why don't we go back to that creative energy that worked for us at the beginning to see how we can keep it fresh, to see how we can revamp it, to see how we can revive it? What does that have to do with entrepreneurship? Yeah.
Trying to get people's attention.
Okay, finding different ways to get people's attention. Do businesses go in cycles? Even good businesses, even really highly successful businesses? Yes, you are not always riding the wave. Well, sometimes you're riding the wave, it just, sometimes different places, right? Sometimes we're at the top of the wave, sometimes we're getting hit by the wave at the bottom. You have to figure out, right? That's part of that pivoting process. You have to come up with creative ways to pivot, to find out what, to determine what's working, what's not working, and how we can adjust to continue to resonate with that audience that we're trying to reach out to. Okay, those of you who don't want to start your own business, you're never going to have anything more than maybe a little side hustle. And that's okay, because this is for everybody. What does this have to do with you? What do you think? Yeah, what do you got for me?
Accomplishing something that you thought of.
Okay, following through on anything that you've thought about, right? It doesn't have to be a business. Okay, what else?
Building resilience.
Building resilience, okay? Let me ask you this. How many of you are hoping, you're in college, so this isn't a trick question. I'm hoping I get the response that I'm expecting. How many of you are expecting to actually work and make money upon graduation? Okay, at some point in time, I'm hoping. Okay, good. If you are planning to advance, make more money, be more successful in that role that you hire into, whatever that may look like. Does this apply to you? Are you just gonna do what everybody did before you? Or are you just gonna keep doing the same thing year in and year out? Probably some of your faculty do. Probably other people that you know do. Probably you've had teachers in high school who have never changed their curriculum or the way they approach students or anything else. How many of you feel that way sometimes? It's just, they're just mailing it in. They're just doing the same thing over and over. How's that working for them? To quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for them? What do you think? You've been in some of those classes. How's it working for them?
Poorly.
Poorly. Probably not well, right? Okay, so with that in mind, if you approach every role in your life, both personally and professionally, as an opportunity, how am I going to keep it successful and where can I make it more successful? And sometimes it's addition by subtraction. You know what I mean? Not everything's working. Sometimes it's okay to say, okay, this is not working. I'm going to quit banging my head against the wall. We're going to stop doing this so that I can do this better. Or give myself an opportunity to go in a different direction. Right? So again, when we talk about these attributes, these are things that I want you to keep in mind in every facet of your life, because it is what will set you apart from your peers. And it will make you more successful whether you're working for somebody else or whether you're working for yourself. And that comes down, and that comes to the next point, which is communication. Quiz. Little quick pop quiz. How many of y'all know about the NACE competencies? You know, no? Yeah? Raise your hand if you've heard of the NACE competencies. Okay, the NACE competencies, NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. There are 8 competencies, 8 competency areas that employers want you to have coming out of your program, right? Coming out of your university or whatever. They want you to have for you to be successful in their environment. And it's leadership and collaboration and technology and communication and all of those things, right? What do you think, and you got a 50-50 shot of getting this one right because I only gave you 4 of the 8. Which 2 of the ones I just rattled off do employers value the most? Which 2 do you think the employers say are most important for you all to have if you're going to be successful in their organization or in their company? What do you think?
Can you say the ones you rattled off one more time?
Leadership, collaboration, teamwork, I'll even throw that one in there. Technology and communication.
Communication?
Communication number 1. Communication is absolutely number 1.
Teamwork number 2.
Good one, important one, but no.
Collaboration.
No, it kind of goes with teamwork, but no, not that one either.
Leadership?
Ironically, okay, I'm gonna give you a really good clue. Ironically, it's the one out of the ones I listed that undermines our ability to communicate effectively more than anything else.
Technology.
Yes. How does technology get in our way of being able to communicate effectively?
Phones.
Yeah, it's oftentimes a distraction, right? It can be a time waster, it can be a distraction. It can also be a really valuable tool that helps us to become more efficient at whatever we're doing. But you can't let it get in the way of your ability to make connections with people. Because one of the biggest things we struggle with, and by we I mean employers, I'm talking from that employer perspective. One of the biggest things that we struggle with today is getting our people to just connect with each other. Because a lot of us have grown, not me, because I'm old, but a lot of us have grown up in an environment where we've had technology our whole lives, right? And that's given us certain advantages, but it's also taken us away from some of the traditional means by which we communicate. And then add 2020 and the pandemic and all that to the equation, where we were forced to kind of be away from people and having that kind of interaction on top of it. And you can see why it's become a problem. Here's why it's so important though. If you're ever trying to pitch, because we're talking about pitches today too. If you're ever trying to pitch an idea, you're trying to pitch yourself to get a job or a promotion. You're trying to pitch an idea to make your job better or to make the company better so that you can get a promotion and get recognized. You're trying to pitch an idea to get somebody to invest in you and your business. You have to be a relationship builder. And we've kind of a lot of us have kind of lost that ability to make those just genuine human relational connections that are so important. Think about it from this perspective. I told you I started out in the corporate sector, right? I have interviewed thousands of people over the years. I have hired hundreds of people in my roles over the years. If I call you all in for an interview, and I wouldn't call all of you, but I call half of you in for an interview, do you think I think you could do the job with support, with training? Do you think I'm thinking you could do the job? Sure. Why would I waste my time and energy calling you for the interview if I didn't think that you could do the job? And assuming your resume vets out the way you put it, right? You are who you say you are, then you can all do the job. So then how do I determine which one of you I'm gonna hire if theoretically you could all do the job? Fill in the, yeah,
Like confident communication in relationship building.
okay. How well you communicate who you are and your skills and what you do, that's part of it. And if I have to work with you every day, and if you're gonna, and especially if I'm supervising you, ultimately, I want to,
Like,
yes. I want to work with people that I like, don't we all? Right? Which means, even if you're shy, even if you're a little uncomfortable, you gotta push past some of that discomfort to show us who you are. To show us that good person that you know, beneath the shy exterior. Because at the end of the day, I'm investing in you. And that's true of your pitches too. So we're gonna get to the pitch part here in just a minute. When we talk about pitching an idea, or even just competing in a pitch competition, you don't have a business, may never have a business, but you've got an idea that you think would make a good pitch, great, do the pitch competition, you could win $1,000. It's pretty low-hanging fruit, it's pretty easy, you don't have to have something well-developed. But that means pushing yourself past your comfort zone. That is how we grow. So don't hold yourself back, but do remember that it's not just your idea I'm investing in. It is you. And that is gonna be a really important thing that we're gonna focus on. And so with that in mind, and of course, intrinsic motivation, I can't want it for you. I mean, I can, and I do. I want you all to be happy, successful, creative, well-rounded people who live long, healthy, happy lives. But regardless of how much I want all of these good things for you, you ultimately have to want it in yourself, and you have to be willing to push past some of the discomfort to become the best version of yourself, and that's the thing I focus on. Any of you sports fans in the room, by chance? Maybe a little bit, a few of you, okay. I often use sports analogies, and I'll often, because we're in Indiana State, right? I'll use Larry Bird as an example. Now, I'm a Chicago guy, so I love Michael Jordan too, so yeah. LeBron fans, I was a big LeBron fan, because I lived in Cleveland for 9 years. I'm kind of tired of LeBron, little LeBron fatigue right now. But anyway, I use the example of Larry Bird because, and a guy named Isaiah Ryder. How many of y'all have heard of Larry Bird? Raise your hand. Okay, even those of you who aren't sports fans, a lot of you probably heard of Larry Bird. How many of you heard of Isaiah Ryder? You're like, Isaiah who? You've heard it because you know. You didn't know Isaiah Ryder before. Okay, Isaiah Ryder was supposed to be the next Michael Jordan. This guy, man, had unbelievable athletic skills. He could jump out of the gym. He won the NBA slam dunk contest as a rookie. I mean, this guy was, wow, a phenomenally gifted athlete. And we don't remember. And I always ask the question, so do you think that's because Larry Bird was a better athlete that we remember him than Isaiah Ryder? If anybody ever saw Larry Bird, kind of awkward, you know, dorky looking, gangly white guy, right, with shorts too short, if you've ever seen the mural, you know, downtown, right? But man, the guy went on to win Naismith Player of the Year, College Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, 3 MVPs, NBA championships. Wow. How did he do all that when a guy who was obviously much more talented and athletic fell into obscurity? What was the difference?
You never tried.
Yes, a lot of times the people who think they already have all the answers are the worst people to work with. Give me the one who's more willing to roll up their sleeves, make some mistakes, take some chances, but work and try things. Oh my gosh, give me that person over the one who thinks they already have it all figured out any day. So be that person. Keep that, keep an open mind. Work hard. But work hard. How many of you are guilty of comparing yourselves too much to other people? Raise your hands. Of course you are, because we live in a society that fosters that. It encourages it. We've grown up with social media all around us, 24/7. We can't get away from it. But the reality is, one, a lot of people are full of crap. So don't believe everything you see. They're not necessarily representing what their whole life really looks like. But two, and this is the more important part of that, are you ever going to be able to be me better than me? No. I don't care how hard you try, you're never going to be a better me. Am I going to be a better you? Focus on what you have control over, man. Work on being the best version of yourself. Be authentic to yourself. That's one of the best advice I give entrepreneurs too. Think about the importance of authenticity in successful entrepreneurship. AI, right? We all know AI. It's the thing that everybody's talking about. It's the elephant in the room. And a lot of people, just like with the big tech bubble and social media bubble, and where everybody started to invest heavily in all the tech startups and everything else, everybody's going to make their millions in AI. Is that a true statement? Some people are. But just because there's a big opportunity out there, does that mean all of you should go into AI? No, because everybody else is thinking the same way, and you may not be really a techie kind of person. Which means no matter how much opportunity there is out there, you're probably not going to be able to beat out all those other people who really love it and really know it and want to do the same thing. The good thing for you is there are other things that you are good at. There are other interests that you have and other skills that you bring to the table that you need to just learn how to monetize, how to leverage, right? Any successful entrepreneur is usually authentic to some degree to who they are, the kind of person that they are, and what they're good at. So figure out how that looks if you're gonna start a side hustle or look at starting your own business, because then you're gonna be a lot more successful. Okay, so getting into the pitch itself. If you are gonna pitch an idea, or if some of you wanna actually participate in our upcoming pitch competition, which, by the way, do we have any of those flyers? Because we can give them some of those flyers before they leave if we've got some. Yeah. Could you? Yeah, that way we'll get some. I'm gonna get you some flyers in case you are interested. We have a very low, when I talk about low-hanging fruit, easy. It's not a big lift, it's not a lot you have to do. It's something that even those of you who normally wouldn't do stuff like this, we make it really accessible and easy. If you've ever thought about pitching an idea, a business idea, a product idea, a new service idea, something, whatever, something that you think you could do better than somebody else, a solution to a problem, that's all you have to have. You don't have to have an existing business or anything else. You can do a pitch. We make it really easy because your first pitch to participate, like in our pitch competition, is just a 3 to 5 minute video. So you can even record it and edit it and do whatever you want to get to that point. And that's something you've got, that's a few weeks out before that would be due. And it's just literally a 3 to 5 minute video. Then I work with, and we've got some other people like Jared, who work with our pitch competitors to help them take that to the next level. What you can do to really make it a stronger pitch and a better pitch. And then we actually hold our finals at Scott College of Business in the spring for the top 10 and cash prizes. And again, this is, you don't even have to have an existing business or product or anything. You just have to have an idea and be able to run with it. Now, there's a little more to it than that, but it's not that difficult if you wanna just get your feet wet and try something. So I'll get you information on that. But how many of you have never actually done, I mean, some of you are probably familiar with an elevator pitch. Raise your hand if you've heard of an elevator pitch. That's basically just where 30 to 60 seconds, right? It's your resume in 30 to 60 seconds if you were to meet somebody that could potentially help you in some way. But how many of you have never done anything like a product pitch or a business pitch or anything like that? Okay, most of you, cool, that's good. But you've done things that are pretty closely related. First thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing any kind of pitch, and it's the first rule of thumb, because I also teach speech classes. First rule of thumb when we talk about speech, know your audience. Know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to. You have to know who your investors are, whatever else, and what they're looking for, or who your consumers are, who your potential customer, and what they want, right? Because if you're not speaking to what they want, what difference does it make? How many of you all have had teachers or bosses or anybody else who did something because they thought it was the best thing to do, but it did not connect with y'all? Did not connect necessarily with the employees or the students in the room, right? Yeah, you can't just assume you know what they want. That's part of marketing, right? We have to actually take some time to figure out, okay, yeah, this worked before, but hey, times change, people change, expectations and interests change. Is it still what they want? And if it's not, how do we get back to giving them what they really want, what they're here for? So that's the first thing, right? We're talking about knowing your audience. And that's where the speech part comes in, other than the delivery and all that itself too. Essays though, you know what goes into a good pitch, because how many of you have been taught how to write an essay? Okay, I hope everybody. All right, what is the first thing we need to do to write an effective essay?
Good title.
What is that?
Good title.
Okay, well, yeah, title, but I mean in the essay itself, what is the first thing we're looking for?
Research.
Well, you got to do the research, but we're not there as far as using it yet. Yes.
Introduction.
Introduction. What do we need to accomplish with that introduction?
Introduce the content.
Okay, so your thesis, right? Your thesis, your topic, something else. Oh, we got to get their interest. Man, I've read. If you give me something really boring, you got to make me want to read it. What if okay. Here, how many of y'all are like, anybody in the room gonna be a meteorologist? Okay, good, so I don't wanna upset anybody. Okay, I'm gonna give you an assignment. You have to write an essay on weather patterns. That's all I'm gonna say. How many of y'all think that could, not necessarily, could be boring? Right? I'm thinking, man, if I have to read all your essays, that could be really painful. I'm thinking it could be boring too, right? But what if we started out that essay talking about, this F4, F5, force of nature and the sheer power and magnitude and damage that it can do. And then I bring in my thesis statement and what I'm going to focus on and the development of weather patterns and ways in which we're experimenting with all that. Does that make it more interesting for you to figure out some of that if that's how I start you out? Absolutely. That's why that hook is so important. I'll give you an example, and this is a very real example. I had to give a pitch when I was at St. Mary of the Woods, because I used to teach there too. When I was at St. Mary of the Woods, we used to have an equine therapy program. I don't think that exists anymore, but I don't know. But anyway, we used to have an equine therapy program, and that is not where we're providing therapy to horses. It's where we're using the horses to provide therapy to people who just, are struggling in some way, shape, or form, right? Just like we have emotional support animals and things like that, right? It's just a type of therapy where we're using, like music therapy, we use music as part of the therapeutic process. Well, they wanted me to do a pitch to investors for their equine therapy program, because I worked very closely with Chris at the time, and, this was a big deal, and she knew I had a lot more experience with the pitch side of things. And so I asked her for some information about some of the people who had actually used the program. Because nothing to me is more compelling than seeing the potential benefit of somebody who's actually used it. Well, there was an example of a 9-year-old girl who had been in a horrific car wreck with her parents. They both died. So she literally watched both of her parents die. And then by the time she got out of the hospital and went to work and went to live with her aunt and uncle, she had completely shut down. She was it almost seemed like she was catatonic practically. She stopped talking, she stopped really interacting, she just shut down. And they tried everything. I mean, they tried regular therapists, they tried, music therapy, they tried all different kinds of things. And then they learned about the equine therapy program at the Woods. And I mean, here was a little girl who loved horses. I mean, she had her stuffed horses, she had her Barbie horse, she had, and it's something she never really actually had a chance to experience firsthand, but she loved horses, right? I mean, I love polar bears. I haven't experienced them firsthand, but I love polar bears. But they thought, well, why not, right? I mean, this is something we know she loves, giving her a chance to interact with something that she loves. Maybe this will do the trick. Now, that's my hook, right? Do you want to know what happens to the little girl? Okay, good. But first I got to tell you about the program. Because now I've introduced the program, right? The program that we're going to try out with this little, and I'm going to tell you about the program and how it works and why it works. And I'm even going to give you some statistics and things to back up why it's been effective. And then when I come back at the end, so there, I've covered the introduction, right? A hook, a compelling hook that gets you emotionally engaged. And sometimes that hook is just your story. Your why. Why do you want to do this idea? What inspired you? What motivated you? What was the problem? Right? That can be part of that hook and introduction as well. But I've got the introduction. I'm going to tell you all about the program and any traction that we've gotten. Traction just meaning any progress you've made with that idea or with that business or whatever else. And then what am I going to come back to at the end? Just like in a good essay, right? We've got the hook. We've got basically the evidence or the body of your paper, right? Where the meat of your idea comes to rest. And then we have your conclusion. But what goes into that conclusion? We always come back to what?
What we started with.
Right. We're coming back. Because that's the payoff, right? That's the payoff for you listening to me talk about all this other stuff. I get to come back and tell you that, as that little girl continued to work with our therapists and with our horses, initially just starting out by something as simple as just cleaning out the stalls and brushing the horses, right? And then eventually riding those horses and interacting with them more. Let's go back, let's look at this from an emotional perspective. The girl shut down and stopped talking at the beginning, right? How many of you all have had a significant loss in your life? It could be a breakup, it could be a death, whatever. How many? Raise your hand if you've ever had that. Okay. It takes time, right? I mean, it hits you hard. Sometimes it doesn't hit you until later because of the shock of it or whatever. And after time, we get through it. And then somebody brings it back up and makes you talk about it. And you think you're past it. But then you find yourself talking about it, and then what happens? Not always, but a lot of the time. You thought you were past it until you start talking about it again. Then what?
You break.
You break.
Crying.
You break, you start crying again, right? It all comes back to the surface all over again, right? It opens that wound all over again. So does it make sense that the girl would not want to talk? Because what's everybody trying to talk to her about?
What happened?
What happened? So where we first started to see this program really work, ironically, was not with the therapists, nor was it with her aunt and uncle. It was with the horses. She started they saw her start talking to the horses when she was brushing and stuff. Why? Why was that safer? Why was that an easy place for her to finally open up?
Because they can listen to her.
Yeah, and are they gonna talk back or judge or ask her anything that makes her uncomfortable? Or judge her even if she's crying or feel bad for her or? It was a safe place, a safe way for her to do that. But, okay, so now she's getting excited about working with the horses. Unlike those bad things that happen in our lives that we don't necessarily always want to talk about. Sometimes we need to, but we don't always want to, right? What do we naturally as humans want to do when something good is happening in our lives?
Share it.
We want to share that, right? And so eventually she started opening up to her therapist, to her aunt and uncle and everything, talking about the fun things, the cool things that she was now experiencing. And not necessarily having to relive probably the worst, most traumatic moment of her life every single day with everybody she talks to. She's able to talk about something else and refocus and just kind of be a kid again. Okay. Can you see how that would be an effective pitch? Because you're appealing to whoever your audience is, you're appealing to them not just on a business level or a financial, on a human level, right? On a very relational level. It's both. It's finding that balance. And then the last thing you want to do when we're talking about a pitch specifically is, so what's the ask, right? And that's why we need your investment. That's why we need you to get, to support our program so that we can continue to make a difference like we did in the life of so-and-so. So it's, but you're always asking for something because investors want to know kind of how you're going to reinvest that money or whatever else. Now, if you do like our pitch competition, you don't have to reinvest anything. You can take the $1,000 and go shopping. But I mean, theoretically though, that needs to be a part of it though, because we want to know that you're going to do something really cool with it, right? That you're going to be able to use that to level up in some way. Questions? I mean, I know this was a roundabout way for me to talk about like pitches and how pitches can work. Again, whether you're working for somebody else, whether you're starting your own business, or even in your own personal life, right? What questions do you have for me?